Hello everyone and welcome to the Activist Lawyer podcast. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm your host to this podcast, which offers a platform for lawyers to share their story and their journey into law and activism. Our guests will discuss the challenges and highlights of their work, as well as important cases, opinions on legal and political matters, and will offer up advice and tips for anyone interested in pursuing a career in human rights law, public interest law, or criminal justice. The Activist Lawyer podcast is brought to you by the Granite Podcast Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Today we're joined by Ifé Thompson, a barrister at Nexus Chambers specialising in criminal defence, family law and human rights. Ifé is nationally and internationally recognised for her pioneering work at the intersection of crime, racial justice and language rights. She's transformed defence strategies by challenging the misrepresentation of Black British English, African American Vernacular English and rap or drill lyrics in court, centering linguistic expertise and racial justice in her practice. Ifé is a movement lawyer committed to confronting injustice at its roots, using the law creatively to expose systemic harm while empowering communities. She is also the founder of BLAM UK and was a United Nations Human Rights Fellow. She also hosts the Black British English podcast, where she explores culture and language justice and Black language practices. Definitely worth downloading. So in today's episode, we will look, of course, at her groundbreaking casework, as well as her approach to youth justice and protest law and the criminalisation of Black language in the system, as well as the impact of her advocacy and her public legal education, which really forms a large part of her work. In particular, I enjoyed the discussion on movement lawyering from her perspective, on the importance of organisation, on community, and the importance of centering community and knowing when to step back as a lawyer and then when to step in and use those skills. But yes, a really packed episode, I think. With so much learning, and we probably could have had another episode to go through a lot more of Ifé's work. But it's worth noting that her work is widely recognised within her community and, of course, on behalf of her clients, but also she's had a significant impact on the profession itself, with peers frequently referencing her work and learning from her case insights, which we do delve into a little bit. So please enjoy today's episode as much as I did recording it. It was an absolute privilege and pleasure to talk to Ifé Thompson. And of course, we'll share links to her cases, the organisations referenced, and indeed social media where you can follow a lot of her work. Please remember to share and review where possible. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Activist Lawyer podcast. I am thrilled to be joined by barrister Ifé Thompson, who joins me from the Gambia. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, I'm bringing sunny greetings.
Sunny greetings. Well, I'm extremely jealous as I sit in my rather grim studio on a Friday here in Uri. So yes, you're having a good time.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it's good weather. I'm currently actually writing my first book, which is looking at Black British English and the work I do on that. So it's nice to be in the sunshine, be inspired by creative scenes, because I feel like the whole area is like really, really beautiful and just makes you think about nature and creativity, and to then channel that into writing is just wonderful.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, I'm sure you're busy on your trip, so we'll get started. And I have to say, I'm just delighted, as I said, to have you here to talk about your work. We've touched on a little bit of it before that we will get into, but can you take us back in time maybe and just tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to pursue this particular path, to get into law, and who or what shaped you in terms of your commitment to these issues? Because I know your work is very much at the intersection between criminal law, human rights and racial justice.
Yeah, so I love Brixton. People know me as Duchess of Brixton. I rep Brixton very hard. I love where I'm from. And Brixton is in South London. It is a very rich community. It's got a high number of Caribbean descendants and also people from West Africa. And I've lived there my whole life. And the thing is that when you live somewhere like Brixton, you develop and are shaped by your community that's there, but also you are very much alive to the issues of anti-Blackness, to the issues of police brutality, and also harm that happens in your community. So for me, Brixton shapes me, going to school and having, my neighbours regularly stopped and searched by the police or having very violent interactions because of police brutality. violent interactions with the police because of the way in which they caused harm to them was something that I would often see. So those kind of things, they radicalize you. They, make you become very much aware of what it means to move through the world as a Black person. And also, going to schools where the classroom dynamic was majority Black, but the teachers were almost all white. And being in that space and thinking, why is it that my teachers are not Black? And why is it that the stuff we're learning in the curriculum doesn't reflect me as a Black person, and you think to Black history? So these kind of questions became very much alive. And I think one of the other things that was really inspiring is that in my secondary school, I had a teacher that was a Windrush descendant, and she was a victim of the racist school systems where they were placing Caribbean children into education subnormal schools. And she would tell us about, the violence that she's also experienced in the education system. So from a young age, we were very much aware of what it meant to live like in the UK. One of our teachers was actually Stephen Lawrence's brother, one of my teachers in school. We're coming from a community where we know what it means to experience injustice, and also people that have experienced that are not far removed from us. Like, they are in community with us, they tell us these stories, and we become very much alive to what it means to live in the UK and be someone that experiences rampant and systemic anti-Blackness and exclusion and just unfairness. And I think when you live in that kind of environment and when that's what you see around you, issues of colorism, seeing the manifestation of white supremacy and how that means, even in terms of shade and texturism, and how you as a Black person relate to yourself is deeply affected. These things radicalize you. They make you want to think about a world where we can have our human rights as people of African descent affirmed. What does it mean to live in a world free of police brutality, free of colorism, texturism, of rampant anti-Blackness, have an education system that affirms your Black identity and actually instills your racial esteem? What does that look like? So I think from a very young age, those things were being questioned. And I'm really thankful for at least my secondary school, which was, I call it the Blackest space I've ever been in. I haven't been in a space Blacker than that, because the teachers were Black and the head teacher was Black, and she did a lot to try and affirm our identity. So those questions of thinking about what does it look like to affirm the human rights of Black people, I think was shaped being in Brixton. And Brixton's got a long legacy of radical organising, the Brixton uprisings, people like Olive Morris, Douglas Howe. Those are people that I learned about as I got older. But Brixton as a community, as a Black community and as a Black space, has always been reactive and thinking about how we can affirm the human rights of Black people. And I just see myself as someone carrying on that beautiful tradition of affirming the human rights of Black people. So I think my environment 100% shaped me. And it got me really alive to what the issues were. I had many of my neighbours, arrested under joint enterprise. So these are things that people might read about in the textbook, but I know people that are in prison for joint enterprise when I was like 15. So you can see the unfairness. You hear in like rap music, free the man them. We're saying free the man them, which is a Black British English term, which is free them from imprisonment, because we know the violence of caging people, but also how this caging is often done unfairly and also done because of systemic anti-Blackness and policing in this country. So it's everywhere that I am, the music I listen to, people I'm around, talk about this injustice because that's what we experience. So I think I would say it's almost impossible to live in that kind of environment and not pick up on those issues and not be moved to do something. I think it works in tandem.
Yeah. And you can really, you can really see that through your work, how your experience has informed that. And, we have to appreciate activists like you and others within communities that are able to voice and raise the concerns, and continue that through their work. And we have spoken before in this podcast about movement lawyering, and just continuing on from your conversation and being informed by your community around you. I'm interested to hear what you think of the term movement lawyering and how, you approach your work, because I know you have described yourself as a movement lawyer. And what does that mean to you and to your work?
Yes, 100%. So, as I mentioned, growing up at Brixton made me very much alive to issues of anti-Blackness, but also thinking about how I could do things to affirm Black people's human rights. And it really got me thinking about Black liberation work and people like Marcus Garvey, and thinking about, what does it look like to organise as a Black person towards liberation, right? And for me, movement lawyering was the framework that I needed to ground myself and to tie my work as an organizer to my lawyering. I always say this to people: I was an organizer, I was an activist before I was a lawyer. I say that all the time. Yes. And I don't want that to get lost, because I come into the space as somebody who was already organizing, and most lawyers aren't and haven't. So I bring that understanding to me into that space, right? And as someone who's used to organizing and thinking about systemic changes and how we can bring that into fruition, I'm always plotting and planning. And what I often found with the types of lawyers that have been propped up as people supporting movements, they normally support like strategic litigation. So they come in to the community and say, we've got this legal challenge that we can do that we think will have a good outcome for you guys, and we need a test person. So bring someone along that we can use to support our legal challenge, who can be our client. And the communities then rushing around trying to find someone that fits the profile. And then the lawyer runs the case. And it doesn't matter whether the case goes well or doesn't go well. Once the case is completed, the lawyer goes about to the next case and leave the community. And even if that case has created bad law or does something harmful to the community, they're like, oh, well, we don't care. We've got our win, or we don't have our win, and we're going to the next case. Whereas if you are in community, you think differently. You already know the issues at hand because you are on the ground. I say people closest to the issues are closest to solutions. So you know what the issues are. You've worked in community with those issues. And actually, instead of you imposing your ideas and saying that I want to do this legal challenge, actually in community together, you discuss what are some of the pressing issues and how can we potentially use the law as a tool. But it's not the only tool, it's one tool. And maybe it might be that better if we do a protest. Actually, it might be better if we go to a journalist and do like an investigative journalism. But it's actually thinking of lawyering as one tool and not the only tool, and using lawyering strategically to support liberation. And I think that is what I find very special about movement lawyering, is the fact that it thinks about lawyering as just an option. It's not like the be all and end all. And I feel like with a lot of student litigation and social justice lawyering, the lawyer is propped up as this person with all the answers and all solutions. And I don't think lawyers appreciate often how much power they hold and how isolating that can be for communities. Because when you come into a room and say you're a lawyer, the environment shifts because people know lawyers to be people in a position of power, people that are able to go in front of judges and argue certain things and are supposed to be extremely intelligent and smart. And that can make people feel very alienated and scared sometimes. So even if they think the lawyer is saying something wrong, they won't say anything because the lawyer knows better. And that means that some of the more radical elements, some of the much more community wins that matter to the community, they won't be shared with the lawyer because the lawyer might, pull it down or say that's not a good idea. And then communities become completely removed from struggles that are supposed to center them. So I think with movement lawyering, because it's the idea of actually empowering communities and for lawyers to be part of those movements, And when I say part of those movements, I say sometimes lawyers should be going, lawyers should be going at all times, to be honest, to the meetings and the, group discussions, and maybe just even helping out with the chairs. Yeah. You don't need to be going there to discuss litigation. Actually, if you are part of that community, you are there not because of your legal skills, but you're there because you are part of the community. And that means you will help out with the chairs, and you will help out with maybe even drafting notes on the board, because you're part of that community. You're not coming in to do a shiny case and go. You're in it for the long run. So I think as someone who's an organizer, I was already in it for the long run. So I had to think of a lawyering strategy that welcomed that approach, and movement lawyering gave me that. So for me, I can't see myself anything other than that, because I was already an organizer. So I couldn't just remove myself and be like, bye to all my organizer friends. I don't know you anymore, I'm just a lawyer. That would be so weird. Yeah. That would be like, what are you doing, Ifé? So I had to find a way of lawyering that honored that involvement I had in my community as an organizer, and enabled me to stay true to that, and that people would want to work with me and not think I'm lording over them, because I'm part of them.
Because you're part of
So I had to find a way of lawyering. Yeah, I had to find a way of lawyering that worked like that, and that enabled me to build trust and relationships. Because I think in life, everything's about relationship building, and the community will trust you when they know you, and you're in the community and you've built a relationship with them, and they can trust you to run arguments, because they're like, oh, Ifé would know that she's already organizing with us, so there's no way that she would make an argument that is against that point, because she gets it.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of trust that is built, and that's the type of lawyering that I find has affirmed me and has enabled me to survive in a profession that is extremely exclusionary, extremely middle class, extremely white. And I think that my community and having those people with me that support me, that trust me, and that think the world of me, that, really say such beautiful things to me, that affirm me, that's how I'm able to stay and do this work.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I mean, you're right to mention your activism pre your life at the bar, because as you said, you continue to carry that through with your work. But I do want to focus on that because it is so important. You were founder of a number of civil society organisations, one being BLAM UK, which supports Black cultural education and wellbeing alongside advocacy rights of Black children in UK schools. And you were also involved in protecting protest rights during the Black Lives Matter movement. So can you maybe zoom in a little bit about your experience in this, because it does form, a formidable part of your work now?
Yeah. So I think what was really important is with BLAM UK, I set that up just after the 2016 Black Lives Matter movement. What happened is that we had just in uni actually learned about the British Black Panther Party and the organising that was going on in Brixton. And I was like, I've gone through the whole education system. I've learned about the American Black Panthers and, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and how they were organising in their communities. But I had never heard of the British Black Panther Party and didn't even know people like Linton Kwesi Johnson was involved and organising under that space in Brixton on Shakespeare Road. Shakespeare Road is right behind my house. Yeah. So that really inspired me to think, okay, these are, other radicals that are organising in the 70s and 80s. What does that look like now? So I remember after the BLM protest in America, I said, let's do a protest in Brixton. And we were chanting outside Brixton Station, Brixton to Baltimore, police killings no more. So it's the idea of international solidarity, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I would like to have a permanent site of resistance to anti-Blackness in this country. So I thought, what would that look like? And I said, okay, let's make BLAM into a space where we do direct community organising. And one thing that was really important to me, especially thinking about how I didn't even know about the British Black Panther Party, was thinking about how the education system robs us of knowledge of Blackness, particularly even Black Britishness. Like, we are robbed of knowledge of our history, which I think is a disservice to not only Black children, but to the whole society as a whole, because Black people have done so much and the history is so much intertwined, right? The reason why Britain is where it is today is because of the colonising and kidnapping, trafficking of Black people, right? And that is left out, or the narrative that's pushed, it isn't one that is at all honest. So what I wanted to do was think about how do we decolonise the curriculum and teach Black history from a Black lens, and from a lens that is affirming, that is honest, and undoes the worker white supremacy that started this idea that Black people had nothing and white people were the one that came in and saved them and civilized them, which is all a lie. So a lot of the work was to push the ideas of decolonising the curriculum. That was one thing that BLAM was set up to do. And since then, we've been in over 10 schools, doing particularly schools in Brixton as well. That's where we started, doing weekly workshops on Black history, affirming the Black children's racial esteem. And we are an abolitionist organisation, so we don't believe in punishment and the idea of detention and punishment as the sole way of relating with people and young people. So one thing that we have at BLAM is we don't believe that any child should be sent out the classroom. So we said these children are together in the classroom. If anyone is disruptive, we will work with that child in that space to say that you are a part of this community and we will not send you out because you've done something wrong. How do we make sure the space is safe enough for you to tell us what is wrong and for you to stay in community with us? Because even the language of detention, it comes from the castle state. They say, they put people that are said to have immigration status that's illegal, or the state has criminalised the way in which they come into the country. They put them in detention. So that language is very castle. And we don't believe that that belongs in the school space. So teachers, they're not allowed to have attention. There was a child that we had in our class that they said it's always disruptive, it's always causing problems. We did a session on the 9 nights, which is a traditional Afro-Jamaican funeral rites, where after 9 nights, they have a community celebration, which is rooted in the West African spiritual practices. And it's something that if you are Jamaican, you will know very well about it. So we did a session about it. And this child that is always said to be the most disruptive, the one that's always having problems in the classroom, that session, he was at the front of the class telling everybody about he was at a 9 night last week. This is what he did. This is how it's like. And you could see the joy in his eyes. And for me, it was particularly important to affirm his own knowledge and as valid in the school space that is often exclusionary. And that changed the dynamic of how he related in the classroom, also how teachers perceive him. They're like, we've never seen him speak so well in class. We've never seen him be so attentive because you've excluded his worldview. So the work that BLAM is doing is affirming Black children's worldview, like other children are able to come into the space and their own home-based knowledge is validated. We do that as well. And one thing I always say is that BLAM can't be in every single classroom. So we created a teacher workbook that covers, because we work a lot with primary school, so it covers the whole Key Stage 2 curriculum. It covers from geography, arts, drama, linguistics, all subjects areas that we could cover. And it's got, it follows national curriculum, it's got lesson plans and plenary. So we said there is no excuse for teachers to not incorporate Black history and Black learning into the curriculum. We've made it easy for you. And those are the ways in which we embody this idea of doing it for self, which Marcus Garvey's like, we do not wait for the state to come and save us. We have enough materials and enough tools. And bearing in mind, I don't have a background as a teacher. I'm not a teacher. My background is not in history. I'm just someone who's passionate about Black liberation work and thinking about what can I do with the skills that I have going to law school and being someone that's done an undergraduate in law and critiquing and analysing, how can I take that back to my community and give it the tools that it needs for liberation? And that was one of the things that we're doing. That book has been doing really well. Brilliant. It's called Global Black Narratives for the Classroom, thank you. And we've got a Black British version and also an Africa, Americas and Caribbean versions as well. And that's what we do in school. So that was one element of the work that we do. Another element, as you mentioned, is the advocacy. And actually, it's interesting you mentioned the advocacy, because the reason why I was able to even do the school-based advocacy, particularly on school exclusions, which remain extremely racist and exclusionary problematic. You know, Black Caribbean students are 3 times more likely still to be excluded from school. And I was a educational paralegal just for kids law. It was one of my first paralegaling jobs. And that was in a very much charity space that was thinking about how we could shop for young people. And it was there I learned about education law. And it was from learning how to be an education law advocate in that space that I took the project to BLAM and started a free school exclusion service. And we are the only Black specific education school exclusion service that exists in the UK. Wow. And a lot of the arguments that we're running is talking about anti-Blackness, talking about how the school space is harmful to Black children. You know, we've had cases where Black children have been sent out of the classroom because of the way they wear their hair. Or we had even one that I still shocked me today. He was excluded because he was staring at a white girl child as a Black child. And we said that this is Jim Crow era surveillance and systemic racism. And when we put all the information about, you know, how Black people have been historically denied agency to look at people like and stuff like that, they then, you know, put jihad back in class. But that was a level of racism that we are seeing, you know, through the school system. We've had children out of the classroom saying Wagwan to their teacher, and Wagwan is a greeting term in Jamaican patois, but also Black British English. So it's like, I always say, if that child had said bonjour to that teacher, they would not be sent out of the classroom. So we're seeing how Black language is policed and excluded. We're seeing just rampant levels of systemic anti-Blackness in the school space. But we use, again, human rights, education law to show up for the children. Sometimes we do community-based campaigns. We had a campaign against the school in South London that had banned a number of Black British English terms, and this was in a Black majority school. They were banned from saying them. They would get in trouble. When we found out about this, we did a community-based campaign, an open letter, asked for a freedom of information request. By the time we finished with that school, they rescinded that policy immediately. You know, we complained about the linguistic injustice and how it was harmful to Black children to suggest that their language practices practices are problematic, but also that not only are they problematic, but they can be a source for you to be excluded from the school space. We said no. So that a lot of the advocacy and the ideas around that came from my background as a lawyer, but also working as a educational or paralegal, and saying again, how can I take the skills I've learned in that space to challenge school exclusions that are extremely problematic and support the community. And we have a thriving case now, because I don't work for BLAM full time, but we've got about 3 educational advocates that work there. We have an overposition of Black women. We've got 10 Black women that work there. I'm so happy that we have a space that is Black woman friendly and Black specific. And we still flying the flag. So even though I'm not there in a full-time capacity, we are still doing advocacy. We've got funding received to do a challenge. Yeah, thank you. To do a challenge on looking at the use of body-worn cameras by teachers, and we've seen that the schools that were a part of this trial to use these body-worn cameras were schools with majority Black children. And so we're saying whose children are being surveilled? Whose children are being surveilled? And it's the same body-worn camera that the police use, the same company acts on. It's the same company that put forward these body-worn cameras for teachers as legitimate items to be used in the school space that's meant to be for learning. We've got them surveilling children in this intrusive and alarming manner. And the report will be coming out later this year about the concerns in terms of digital rights of children being completely ignored, and we'd say in a very problematic manner. So that's some of the advocacy in terms of that. And then moving on to the Black Lives Matter and the legal observing, that became, because when I used to go to a lot of protests that were against police killings in this country, whether that be the protests that were had that I had in Brixton, but also the ones in relation to like Rashawn Charles, or the ones in relation to other people that had been caused harm by the state, there was no, or women killed by the state, there was no legal observers. And I used to legal observe with Haldane Society Social Stories, big up Haldane every single time. Yep. And they talk about observing, they talk about legal observing. And I was like, why is it that when I am a Black majority protest, there wasn't a legal observer in sight, knowing that we are met with the full extent of harsh and problematic policing on a regular basis. So think about that times 2 on protests, because policing a protest has been extremely violent in this country as well. But then coupled with how policing of Black people is already violent, combine the 2, protesting Black people, you're going to have rampant police force. There was a report that NetPower did about the level of violence the police enacted on Black communities during 2020 protests. You know, they had police on horses charging at protesters in a way that we had not seen before in this country. So that kind of level of police surveillance and harm has to have people on the ground ready to document it and hold it to account. And I wasn't seeing that. So I said, if there is ever a protest that requires legal observing, I'm going to use the fact that I am now, closer in the legal field. I think by then I had just finished law school, or maybe was in law school. I made a promise to myself that I will ensure any protest going forward, there will be legal observers on the ground. Amazing. Even if it's just me by myself doing it, I would do it. And social media is a very powerful platform, because I would see in America, there was call-outs during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. There was call-outs from movement lawyers saying, we're going to have people on the ground doing arrestee support, doing legal observing, that will act pro bono for any Black Lives Matter protesters arrested. And I've seen those tweets going viral. I was thinking, well, if that can go viral in America, I was like, what can I do in the UK? I was like, might not be a practicing lawyer yet, but I do have people on the ground that I know that are lawyers that would definitely want to be involved. I just did a tweet. I just said, is there any lawyers that would be willing to assist Black Lives Matter protesters pro bono? And that tweet went off. I think we got 2,000 likes. Loads of lawyers in my DM saying that we will do it. We're happy to provide pro bono support for anybody who's not qualifying for legal aid. And there was just a really, really positive response. And I said, okay, well, if we can get them to agree to pro bono legal support, let's see if we can get them to do some legal observing too. Put another call out to them. They said, yeah. On the ground, on the first day that there was the BLM protest on the Saturday, we had 200 lawyers, majority barristers, who had never done this kind of thing before, on the ground, legal observing. I was able to organize some training online by some of my comrades at Haldane. We did training online, recorded that, and sending that video out. People would watch the video. We were given an enormous amount of very kind donations. Quickly ordered some high-vis jackets, put the word legal observer on it, got them on the ground, doing legal observing, like documenting, writing what they'd seen. And we'd had a massive spreadsheet of what has happened hour by hour of different, ways in which we've seen police harm and violence and unfair arrests. And that was a bank that, other lawyers could use during their cases when they were unfairly arresting protesters for, assault emergency worker, when we know that it was the police that had actually done the assaulting. And having the legal observer's notes was really helpful for lawyers to challenge, problematic, racist, violent policing to protesters. So that was because of social media, but also again, because I had been in community, been on protests, seen those no legal observers, and said, okay, what can I do to bring that? That's why I say that movement lawyering is not just about the courtroom. It's also outside the court, about being in community, seeing what is missing and bringing that to the forefront.
Well, I mean, that's you as an organiser, first and foremost, and that's feeding into that organisation. I mean, BLAM UK, talk about impactful, groundbreaking work. You can't get more impactful than that. And I hope that organisation continues to be supported, because that is absolutely crucial work. And, fair play to you and your colleagues on that. Long may it last in terms of the success of that organisation. Ifé, you spoke there about linguistic injustice. And we spoke about the classroom setting and how language, and indeed the interpretation of language, can demonise or marginalise individuals, but indeed entire communities. But that theme, I suppose, of linguistic injustice has really carried through to your legal work. And, you really look at challenging the criminalisation of Black language and cultural expression. And we can see that through some of the strategies that you've invoked through some of the case law, like OR versus LZ. And what do these cases really signify in terms of linguistic and racial justice? Because it's really a pivotal part of your work.
Yeah. And again, I have to go back to me being an organizer, because it was the young people at BLAM that really switched on my linguistic justice eyes and had me thinking more about language justice, because I was thinking, how can I show up for them? Mm-hmm. I remember when I first went into school in Loughborough Primary School, the young people were speaking to me and they sounded like me and my friends. But they were like 8 to like 20 years gap. And I was like, hold on, you sound like me and my friends. And I just was really like taken aback. And I was thinking, how could I show up for their linguistic rights? Because I know the school space classes that language wrongly as UK slang, even though it's a language in its own right, because no language is a slang, right? And then I was thinking how I can affirm them by letting them know that they are speaking a different language, actually. So I started to create lessons on language justice for them and letting them know about the language that they speak, which I call Black British English. And it was through doing that type of work I became more exposed to language injustice and what does language hierarchies look like and how does white supremacy work in that space, and how do we have a system where certain accents are seen as more prestigious than others, when actually what we do know it's a classist issue and it's an issue of a racialized issue as well. So the young people at BLAM and children at BLAM really woke me up to thinking about their language rights, which in turn helped me formulate arguments, again, for the school exclusion case that we were having, which then tied directly to my work as a barrister. So again, I say my community organizing has informed everything, the ideas about what is a language, who can validate a language, and thinking about linguistics. Like I've read so many linguistic books and become very immersed in that subject, because again, there's even a subject called racial linguistics, which looks at how racism is intertwined directly with language injustice, and like how the way racism is so insidious, it's even alive in the sound world. It's even alive there. So a lot of the work and understanding I have around language rights has come from that space. Mm-hmm. So it was a young Black girl who, even her arrest was unlawful. Like that was even the first thing. Her original arrest that led to the exchange with the police officer was unlawful. So that you also have that harm of just racist and problematic policing at the forefront of this case anyways, because if that arrest did not even occur, we wouldn't even be before the court. So I had to have the exchange with the officer where she said those words, my nigger and the word cracker. Like we wouldn't even be there. So my first legal argument was actually that the arrest in and of itself was unlawful. And the judge even said to the prosecution, like, from what I've read on Ms. Thompson's legal argument, there is a case to be heard here. And she's like, even if the Crown wants to proceed, this, because I was asking for everything that happened after that arrest to be excluded. That would include what happened at the police station, because the arrest in and of itself was problematic. So I said the whole of the prosecution's case should be thrown out. So that why we want to highlight that, because again, it touches on like the different ways police violence occurs, whether it's the arrest being unlawful and then triggering a span of events with further criminalisation that should never happen in the first place. And I really want to put that out there. This young person, she was speaking to the officer, and as a person who's fluent in English, you're not going to be able to just turn off your language practices because you're in a different space. It's like, it's really unfair to suggest that people, because they live in the UK, are going to be fluent in mainstream English, that they may be more fluent actually in Black English, and particularly in exchange with a police officer, a space where someone's in authority, a place that's isolated, she didn't have an appropriate adult around her. You will revert to the most comfortable version of yourself, which is speaking for a lot of people in Black English. So my client was doing that. Yeah. And in that exchange, she said the word my nigger, which is what a lot of Black English speakers refer to, say my friend, to refer to another person. And in some instances, it can be deracialized. And then my client was like, no, actually, I just realized you're a white man. You can't be a my nigger. But because the way the language are in that community and her people around her, majority Black, her way of saying my guy is my nigger. And the police immediately took it as, this is racist language, this is problematic, I can't believe what you said, and completely disregarded her language rights. And I don't take that lightly. I think that these ideas of what we call anti-Black linguistic racism punish Black people for taking part in Black language practice, because I believe they actually want to eradicate the use of it. So by punishing you for it, you then stop using it. So, I genuinely believe that the reason why they had such a reaction to her use of it is because they don't want you to use that kind of language. They want you to, only speak mainstream English and disregard cultural specific language or languages that are spoken in your community. My client was like, actually, no, you can't be a nigger, but actually you could be a cracker, which is again another AAVE term. And for both words, she was then arrested for and charged and prosecuted for it. And it went through the policing force. They did not have any regard. There was no mention anywhere of them reviewing or looking at Black language practices to see what the word means, like you would do any other language. If another child was fluent in French, you would get a French interpreter. If you are not a speaker of French, you would not start saying that you are an authority of that language unless you had an interpreter or someone who can tell you what that language means and translate it to English. But why is that happening to Black language practices? And we know it's following the ongoing anti-Blackness that disregards Black lives and disregards Black people, and everything that connects to Black people, including our language, is not seen the same way we are not seen. Again, the CPS, which is meant to be the buffer that reviews the cases and, reviews charges and stuff, and is a last say and the authoritator of a charge or whatever, they looked at that and said, yeah, this is fine, let's go to court on it. Again, no regard for language rights. Again, no review, just that the only way they see this word is through white mainstream lens, where it is in white mainstream English, it is a racial slur, 100%. But they're not appreciating that there is another language that doesn't see that and doesn't use it like that. And even the way the word is structured, how it's said, and the intonation of the word is completely different. No regard to that language. And until I got an AAVE linguist, and these linguists that I know about, and the work I've done on that is because of the stuff I was doing in schools. Some of the school stuff I was doing lesson plans on African American Vernacular English, looking at the history of the language, looking at the linguists that studied the language. So I already knew about linguists to contact because of the work I've done in Black. So I always say the community organizing was at the forefront of giving me the tools to run certain legal arguments and think about certain creative strategies with the community in mind. Recommended the linguist, said that, yeah, they're able to do it on legal aid rates, whatever, they got that sorted out. Then we got the report done. I served it on the CPS, wrote a rep, and on the day of trial, they offered no evidence.
The detail in that is something that really, I suppose you had to strategically litigate on that to uncover those problems and that racial kind of systemic racism within the system itself. But a large part, and we will share links to these cases because you do have a few more that focus on the linguistic injustice that you've seen and that your clients have experienced through the criminal justice system. So I know youth justice is obviously clearly a major focus of your your work. We've touched on some systemic issues that you have experienced in terms of the treatment of young Black people in the UK criminal justice system. But you've also been involved in something we've addressed previously, which is your work around rap and drill lyrics used as evidence in court, the impact that has on people going through the criminal justice system. And you're also involved in Art Not Evidence, a fantastic campaign that we have highlighted on the podcast previously.
Yes. So, I find, as someone who's a youth justice lawyer and has a lot of youth cases, a lot of my clients are fluent in Black British English. So what you will have is that they will speak to me in Black British English and I will speak back to them. And they're like, wow, you speak like me. And I affirm their language practices in that space as well. I think it's one thing to affirm it in the court space, but actually what does it look like for my lawyer to speak my language as well? And what does it mean for me to feel safe in a very isolating environment? I've had clients that other lawyers have not been able to work with them. They said that, they've not been able to, they've had to get new counsel because that young person hasn't been able to engage with counsel. As soon as they meet me, and I speak to them in Black British English, they're like, oh my gosh, you sound like me, I feel comfortable. And it helps build a space of safety and rapport in a very alienating environment. So I think, again, my work with BLAM, but also being a fluent Black British English speaker, has been an asset to me in my job. I remember growing up in school, you're taught that, you shouldn't speak this way, it's improper, it's unprofessional. Actually, for me, it's been extremely professional. It's actually helped me run case strategies. It's actually helped me speak to my clients and actually get the best outcome for them, and actually work in their best interest and support them best because I understand them better. So actually being fluent in another language and being bilingual in Black language practices has been particularly important to me as a lawyer that works in my community and works with young people. So I think that's one thing that I really want to get out there as well. And a lot of my work, again, I believe in terms of supporting young people has come from, working with BLAM. And I used to be a youth worker as well. So it was particularly important for me to think about supporting young people. And what we often have at the bar, which is a problem, is that people treat the youth courts as a training ground. I'm going to use this so I can, segue to do youth court work. And a lot of work has been done by the Youth Justice Legal Centre. And especially even when you're kind of registered to practice, each year to renew your practice certificate, you have to say that you've done some training on, youth justice work, because it's a separate area of law. Mm-hmm. And young people are very vulnerable and they need to have the best tailored representation from someone that's specialist in expertise. So I think, again, my work for Justice for Kids Law and work with young people and youth has been extremely, helpful in terms of running certain arguments and cases. And actually, in a lot of my youth cases, I've had the issue of drill and rap music being used against them in the youth court. That's something that has come up a lot. So my work with Art Not Evidence comes from my experience with clients that have had their music unfairly used against them, and music that represents their lived experiences unfairly used against them. But also, I go a step further, and I argue this a lot, it's also, again, a further criminalisation of Black language practices as well, because these genres of music, rap and drill music, they are spoken, rapped in Black British English. That's the language that the rappers are fluent in. So when you then criminalise, I haven't had a case where one of the rap music, and bearing in mind, Sarah, the case had nothing to do with rap music. It was about possession with intent to supply drugs and whether my client was involved in that. And my client was not a rapper. But the prosecution had a theory that, he was in the music video, which we completely denied that he was in that video. And the evidence that was used to support that was very, very concerning. It wasn't done by anyone else. The professional-based ID person that specialised in identifying people's faces, it wasn't done by them. But also the way in which the lyrics were interpreted as well, they were done by a police officer who works in the gangs unit. So not someone that is a specialist on rap or G music, but also someone that's not a linguist on Black British English. So they were writing the word ting can only mean a gun. Pardon? The word ting can mean anything in patois and in Black British English. What do you mean? So it's like a complete erasure of Black language practices, a complete erasure of what words mean to communities, but also only seeing this language through a criminal lens. It furthers on just the way in which Black people are only seen for a criminal lens as well. It's only because Black people are seen for a criminal lens that we're seeing such high levels of stop and search, such high levels of fusion. It's the same pattern, but we're seeing it again, even in the language practices, it extends to that arena as well. One of the things that I was particularly keen on is, calling that out. And that's why I particularly love the work of Art Not Evidence, and I had to get involved in it because I see it often in my cases because they criminalize the ways in which Black people express themselves, including the music, and they don't give the music the same grace that any other genre or any other form of art gets to, exist in as a creation of fiction. A lot of these are fictional ideas of what sells. But Black people are not given that creative expression to be able to create fiction. What does it mean to, be someone who's artistically free and can create music and music videos to reflect that and not be taken literally? But it's like the only way that they are seeing Black artists through this one-dimensional criminalized lens that can only lead to help them bolster their prosecution. Because we say if your case is strong enough, you don't need to put in rap music videos, but the ways in which stereotypes can be relied upon and can be weaponized, which is why they rely on it to help bolster, I would say, somewhat weak convictions. Because if it was so strong, you wouldn't need to add that in there. So that's definitely a problem, and that's why I particularly like the work of Art and Evidence, because it calls out that art should not be seen as evidence. It should be given its free and creative meaning, and it shouldn't be criminalized the way that we're seeing. And we don't see that happen to any other genre, but Black music genres, we have to unpack why that is in a society that is known to be systemically anti-Black. How is that extended to language practice? How is that extended to music? Calling that out as well. And I think the work that's being done there on protecting creative expression and protecting, even on a human rights level, the right to freedom of expression is particularly important. It's enshrined there, but we're not seeing that given to Black arts, and then we have to ask why. And not only ask, but then put in measures to call it out. I will always ask for the evidence, but excluded. Yeah. If a police officer is saying that he's an expert, not in my books, you're an expert at all. We can get someone that's an expert to come in, or if the court says no, then I'll get a defense expert challenge it. But a lot of lawyers have been taught a very one-dimensional approach to lawyering. It does not encourage a racialized or linguistic justice or looking at anti-racism at the heart of the case. They've just been taught to accept things as is, But when you come from a background where, the police have been known as institutionally racist before Macpherson, we've been saying the police are racist. Like when you come from a community that actually have risen up and said no to police violence and, had uprisings because of that, then you come to the space knowing that the prosecution are not neutral sites and the court is not a neutral site. But if you know that the site is not neutral, what do you do about that? So it's one thing to acknowledge it. The next thing is, what can we do about it? And that's when the movement lawyering comes in.
And can we just add that the failure to address this within the criminal justice system, we've spoken on this show before about the devastating consequences, the life-changing consequences that this has on an individual who has suffered at the hands of this. It's a matter of life and death, so to speak. And thankfully some, decisions have been overturned or found unsafe. But it's really to highlight that this is so crucial in respect of an individual's experience of the criminal justice system. And, it's great to have Art Not Evidence and campaigns like that. And of course, the strategic litigation alongside that and the community lawyering piece, the organisation, to really highlight this, because it's not just about tackling, the use of linguistics. It really is life-changing. And unfortunately, people have been through the other end and have suffered the consequences of this. So it's hugely important work.
Yeah, I think there's two folds. There's the inherent exclusion and harm that caging and imprisoning people does to people, whether it's for remand periods and they get released. It has life-changing effects because the prison system is very unsafe. Yeah. It's a space where you have state-sanctioned violence happening because people experience violence in that space and the state put them in there. Exactly. So what does that say about that environment that is upheld as somewhere that people should be going to, despite it having such high levels, places like Wandsworth Prison, high levels of violence that happens to people in that space from even, unfortunately, other prisoners and also from prison guards themselves. So that space is very unsafe. We have things like, strip searches that happen in those spaces, stuff that are very, very harmful to individuals happen in that kind of space. And then on top of that, you have people that have unfairly been in prison because of racist and problematic prosecutions and reliance on joint enterprise. And all of that joint enterprise stuff is bolstered by things like relying on rap music and ideas around gangsterism that is unfairly placed on Black people as well. So you have that problem, but you also have the problem of just what a conviction does to somebody. Because I have clients that, you know, may not be facing imprisonment, but the ongoing harm that having conviction does to you and actually having to maneuver society with that is devastating too. You know, it changes your trajectory, what field you can go into work in. And things of that nature impacts the amount of money you can make because of the way in which you are pigeonholed often when you have a conviction. And also just how scary it is to go through the court system. You know, a lot of my clients have intense anxiety. It affects your mental health. Like, the whole process of having to be taken to court is not a nice one. And so we shouldn't be funneling people through unnecessarily. And what these caveats of using rap music and other things to bolster weakness do is they unfairly bring people towards and into the justice system or injustice system. And often when they are found not guilty or that the state overturns the conviction, there's nothing that can be done to undo the harm. The harm, like I always say, my job as a lawyer is to reduce the harm, because when you're already before the court, harm has already been done. I'm just trying to reduce the amount of harm. So there's nothing the state can do to fix that. So that we have to proceed with extra caution. If there is nothing that can be done to undo that harm, there has to be a high level of degree of caution used, which I'm not seeing. And then I come in and I'm doing the harm reduction. But again, as I said, when I'm already involved, the harm's already been done. It's just trying to reduce that and, you know, seeing what can be done. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the case that I had of the Black defendant I had that was recalled to prison for his use of Black language practices to a Black police officer. He said the word "my nigger" to the officer as a, you know, trying to calm the situation down. He was released on license. So even some of these linguistic justice cases, because of the ways in which Black people are over-policed and over-criminalised, they may be in the community on license, which means any small thing that leads to prosecution will trigger them being recalled back automatically to prison. And that looks like them being in prison for something that's not an imprisonable offence, because of the ways in which we are more likely to be, you know, policed or given sentences and stuff like that, imprisonable sentences, that means that we are more likely to be on the sharpest end of punishment for things that may seem quite mundane or not attract them. There's a double, like, jeopardy, double edge. That comes with that as well, that must be taken into account. So I think that more needs to be done. From what I understand, the police and even the CPS, they don't have any sort of linguistic justice sort of approach or reviewing of the cases. It's non-existent.
Gosh.
And that can't go on.
No, I mean, there's a huge piece of work there. But do you find it's evolving? Do you see, I mean, thankfully, we have campaigns like Art Not Evidence. Thankfully, we have people like you and your colleagues who are pushing this forward. But where are we and how do you see this evolving? Do you think it's through training? Do you think it's through litigation? How do we improve this situation or make sure it doesn't happen at all? Yes,
I think for my work as a movement lawyer, I think that one of the key things is sharing knowledge. So, like, I will always, you know, write very full details of what happened in my case. And I do it because I want people to read it and think of it as a tangible strategy that they can use as well, that they can see. And I put the experts' names on there. I know a lot of, like, lawyering is very individualistic. Like, I want to get the best cases. I want to have the best practices, right? Me.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, what does it look like to show up for your community? So for me, I put names of my experts on my, you know, on my Chambers page. People don't often do that, but I do it because it's not about hogging the experts so I could get the best outcome. Actually, what does that do to help community liberation? So one thing that I do, again, is I put full-on details about, you know, how I've run the case, or I'll put it on Twitter, or I'll put it on my Instagram, I'll put it on my LinkedIn so that people can see it as a tangible way to challenge linguistic racism or challenge, you know, anti-blackness and policing, whether it's through racial trauma. And I have, you know, lawyers reach out to me, you know, like I did a piece recently for Barrister magazine explaining how lawyers can challenge anti-black linguistic racism, and I explained through my cases, and I reference our BLZ as well. Yeah. And I had a very senior member of Chambers, I think one 1980 school from a different set of Chambers, email me saying, I've sent your article to everyone in my Chambers. I think it's brilliant. And I think that we can all learn from it. And that's the kind of thing that I want my work to do. I want it to be accessible. I want it to be, because you could easily put that kind of book, put that into a book and charge, and you could do all of that, but which can be done. I'm not saying don't do it, and I'm not saying I won't do it, so hold me to account. But what I'm saying is that there should be space for things to be accessible. People could challenge in the way that they lawyer. Yeah. So that's one thing that I do within my work that I think has been really helpful. I mean, just even last week I had someone come up to me at a protest law event, and they said to me, like, I remember seeing your tweet about using a Canadian case called R.V. Morris. And that was a Canadian case where the judge took into account systemic racism that a Black person had gone through as a factor to reduce mitigation. And I relied on that in a case in the UK. And the judge said to me, Ms. Thompson, I've actually done this. I've actually been referred to this case as part of my judicial training, but I never thought a barrister would ever refer it to me. And you're the first one that's ever done it. And thank you for doing that. You know, he personally, he said that, you know what, your client should thank you, because if not for you, he wouldn't be getting a sentence this low. Yeah. And we got a really good outcome. And she said that since that day, she's been using that case in her cases going forward. So it's about sharing ideas, because again, I always say law school produces very one-dimensional lawyers that are ill-equipped to deal with a lot of racial justice and social justice issues, particularly around race, particularly around things like, you know, pregnant women in prison. They're not equipped to deal with things of that nature and challenging and things to do with mental health, not very well equipped. That is why, for me, documenting is super important. I think training has its place, but I just think that sometimes people use training as a plaster. A
tick box.
Oh, I think exercise. Therefore, it's tick box. So I think that's one thing. But I do also think the law school needs to do better. Like, it needs to be a requirement that things of racial injustice, things like that, needs to be on curriculum, because you're going to a justice system that is known. I don't even like to say that name. So I'm not going to say this person's name, but there was a review done in 2017 into racism and ethnic minorities' disproportionate outcomes in the justice system in 2017. That far back, almost 10 years ago, there was a review that said, you know, the experiences of Black and brown people in this country in justice system is abhorrent. It's terrible. It's disproportionate. It's bad. Yeah. So law schools also have a duty, as they're producing the new lawyers that are coming up, to incorporate in the curriculums what does racial justice look like. It's part of human rights. These are human rights arguments. Racial justice is a human.
Totally.
How are you incorporating that into law school? How is it that as part of you training to become a barrister or a solicitor and passing, in order for you to pass, you need to have knowledge on racial justice? That should be, like, I think that on that level, that is the kind of training that I'm getting behind, that kind of level. Not your tick box kind of thing. Yeah.
Training just for training's sake of it. I think that's really important, that it's incorporated into the system from, you know, early on. And as you said, it is human rights. And do you also think that it might encourage or support people who might otherwise feel fearful of entering the profession, you know, and see it as a kind of archaic, white, kind of patriarchal profession? How would you speak to anybody listening today who, you know, feels inspired by the conversation we've had today, but who wants to maybe follow in your footsteps, become a barrister or a solicitor and work in this type of area? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think you have to find your people, find your tribe. Like I had a number of Black women, mentors, also Black men as well, that were barristers that had been in the profession 10 years, 15 years, that took me under their wings. So, you know, I tried to make effort for me to, like, you know, do many pupils and meet so many pupilages. I tried to make effort to do that. I tried to find a set that definitely, like, matched my personality. So I knew that I had to go for sets that were more left-wing leaning. I had to go for sets that already had people that activists within them, because I wouldn't do well in other parts of the bar that are extremely conservative, that are, you know, they only do prosecution work. Like, I knew that I didn't want to prosecute a day in my life. So, you know, I think you have to find your tribe, find what you're looking for, and, you know, have a sense of audacity of a white middle class man. Like, they have so much audacity. So you have to have that same audacity and say that this space, I belong in this space actually, but also, like, not only do I belong in this space, that actually a room must be made for me to be in a space. And I think it's a very difficult profession to get into. And there's definitely more work that needs to be done in terms of like recruitment being more equitable, I believe, recruitment being more racially just. I think there's definitely an issue there. And I do think that although barristers are people in court, they may not be the best people at recruitment. And I think there's something around that, because it's one thing to be a good barrister, but it's another thing to be HR recruitment. And every other profession has been a professional HR recruitment. We don't, because barristers are self-employed. So I do think there's something that needs to be done on a systemic level, thinking about recruitment practices, thinking about how lawyers can be better trained to be better at recruitment, because I don't think that they are getting that. Not only recruitment and retention as well, because a lot of black barristers sometimes don't stay. And that's we could do another whole conversation about that, because the space is not made safe enough for them as well. So I think there's a lot that the bar needs to do, but I think that what has helped me going through this profession has having black women barristers that have held me up, that are also equally radical, that support the work that I do as well. I think that's helped me a lot to be able to breathe in this space. And when I say certain things happen to me in court, when I've experienced misogyny, in the courtroom from judges, from opponents, I've been able to speak to black women barristers and they've helped me. And we also have a group chat actually called Black Crime Pupils that was created by me and a couple other black barristers, and anyone that we know that's a black crime pupil, we add them to that group chat. And we're like, if you've got anything that's happening in court that's upsetting you, just put it in the group chat. So we're also having an informal network that we're creating to help sustain ourselves. But I just hope that my journey can be an inspiration to anybody who wants to do this space, a working class black girl from what we call the ends, that has come into space and also I've not felt I had to bend too much. I've made the space palatable to me and made it work for me. And I think that if I can do that as a black girl from Brixton, from the ends, you can do it too. So I just want anyone who is thinking about coming to the profession and not feeling like it is for them, I challenge them to feel like you can make the space something for you as well. Like it's a profession that's been there for a number of years, but it doesn't mean that you haven't got something that can bring to it to revitalize the space. I think all of us have a unique purpose, and I think that it's never too late for something to be done differently.
Brilliant. Really, really useful advice there, and very important to highlight the issues within the profession as well. Just before we finished up, and I know you've lots more to come, and I actually came across your work on social media, so I know you're very, very active on social media. We've mentioned that. It's clearly a very important part of the advocacy and also empowering communities and sharing your work, as we've spoken about. So we will share your link so that people can find out more about it. But has there been a standout moment in your career so far, something that you're particularly proud of that you'd like to share? And also, what message would you like listeners to take away in terms of your work today, if you could just sum it up?
Wow, stand out. I mean, there's been so many. I just love this job. I feel like there's no job like it. Like, I just feel very privileged that I'm able to take my community's needs and concerns into the courtroom space and argue it and it be heard. I think that's a very enormous privilege to be able to do that. I do think that these language justice cases have been really emotional for me, because often when I'm running the arguments, I'm like, will the court get it? And even if they do get it, will they still, because you can run a good argument and still lose. Yeah. And I always worry about that. But I think that the language justice cases, from what I've seen, this is the first time that I've seen or known of cases to be run using linguists. And we win, the deepest offer of evidence. I do think, for me, those were really proud moments, because I was able to really tie, again, my work as a community organizer to lawyering. And one of the cases that really actually stood out for me is the Jamila A case, because that case, we didn't have any legal aid for that case, Sarah. So I was doing that pro bono at first. And I was able to get 2 linguists on board to do the expert reports pro bono, only because I had created a relationship with them and they'd seen my work online. And they did the reports without being paid. And I think if that didn't speak to the power of community organizing and being in community and being in spaces, what does? So I think that particular moment, I've actually seen people show up for that client and for the work that I was doing without being paid, because it was the right thing to do. That really embodied for me what movement lawyering is. Come hell or high water, we will fight this case. And I think I think that really brought the beauty of like what community means and what that looks like in the courtroom space for me. I think that probably was a shine out moment, and we also got a really good outcome to stay off from that evidence eventually. But just that, and then that was also, we had like Black journalists coming to court covering the case, like that community. You know, we had like even spaces that are not legal, like GRM Daily, which is a Black arts rap music space on YouTube. Like they platform a lot of Black artists and rap music. And they put up their case saying that they can't believe a Black woman has been forced to keep saying the N-word. So like it crossed different parts of society as well. So I think for me, that case was a standout moment because of the amount of people that it reached, but also how it brought community into the space and like how community always shows up for each other. That case definitely stood out for me.
Powerful, yeah. Look, Ifé, it's been an absolute delight and a real privilege to talk to you, and to have the opportunity to learn more about your work and to share your work on our platform. And it's been fascinating, and I'm sure others will agree. We will put the relevant links to your work and to your social media as well. Very important to follow this. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's nice sometimes to reflect on things. Sometimes you're doing this work and you don't have time to sit down and reflect and think and actually appreciate and celebrate the wins. And I think this podcast has given me space to actually do that. So thank you for allowing me to do that and think about these things as well.
Not at all. It's been a real privilege, as I say, and so much in this. We'll have you back again because I think we could do another few hours of talking about some of the issues that we touched on today. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your break.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I feel energized as always, and we go again.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.